The ancient Sumerians did not create myths. They recorded stories they considered absolute truths about their origins and their gods. What we call mythology, they called history. Samuel Noah Kramer, renowned Sumerologist. Imagine holding in your hands a clay tablet over 5,000 years old, covered with strange markings made when humanity was just beginning to record its thoughts. What you would be holding isn't merely a piece of clay hardened by time, but possibly the key to one of humanity's greatest enigmas: who we are and where we came from. The cuneiform tablets of ancient Sumer contain some of the most intriguing and disturbing narratives ever recorded by humanity. Among their angular lines, we find repeated references to the Anunnaki, beings described as those who from heaven to earth came. Key. But who were these beings that the Sumerians revered as gods? In the depths of modern Iraq, where the first great known civilization of humanity once flourished, archaeologists have unearthed thousands of these clay tablets. Dated between 3,000 and 1,000 years before the Common Era, they reveal a civilization that seemingly emerged from nowhere, with surprising advancements in mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, literature, and law. Most disconcerting is that the Sumerians themselves attributed all their knowledge not to gradual development, but to a direct gift from the Anunnaki. The tablets of the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian epic of creation, describe these beings as cosmic deities who judge the cosmos and establish universal order. In the Sumerian pantheon, Anu reigned as the supreme god of heaven, while his sons, Enlil and Enki, ruled over earth and waters. Together, they formed the core of the Anunnaki, often portrayed as beings of impressive stature, endowed with powers over the elements and with longevity incomprehensible to humans. The hymn to Enlil, one of the oldest known religious compositions, dated approximately 2,500 years before the Common Era, describes this god as the great mountain whose top reaches heaven. Cite, the tablets state that his word makes heaven and earth tremble, and that, without him, no city would be built, no settlement founded. The traditional academic view interprets these narratives as mythological expressions of natural phenomena or abstract concepts. The Anunnaki would be personifications of celestial forces, creations of human imagination to explain the inexplicable. However, an alternative current of thought, popularized by authors like Zecharia Sitchin, proposes a more literal interpretation. What if the Anunnaki weren't mere mythological constructs, but visitors from another world? What if the Sumerian tablets were recording, not myths, but actual encounters with beings of advanced technology? This controversial perspective finds echo in enigmatic passages from the tablets that describe the Anunnaki descending to Earth in celestial boats, establishing residence and eventually creating humans to serve them. Is it coincidence that the Sumerian word Dingir, used to denote deities, is represented by an ideogram showing a star or bright object in the sky? The Nippur tablets, discovered in the 19th century, contain fragments of what appears to be surprisingly advanced astronomical knowledge. They show representations of the solar system with the correct number of planets, including some invisible to the naked eye. How could the Sumerians have such knowledge without telescopes? What makes these tablets even more fascinating is that many remain only partially translated, while others await decipherment in museum storage facilities around the world. What other Anunnaki secrets are still hidden in these ancient texts? Have you ever wondered why so many ancient cultures around the world share similar myths about gods who descended from the heavens to create and civilize humanity? Could it be possible that all were describing the same phenomenon from different perspectives? The mystery of the Anunnaki only deepens when we examine the details of how they supposedly shaped our species. A story that challenges our understanding of human nature itself. When the gods were like men, they did the work, carried the baskets. The gods' work was heavy, the distress was much, and great was the effort. Atrahasis tablet, approximately 1800 years before the Common Era. This extraordinary passage from the Atrahasis epic reveals something surprising. Before the creation of humans, the Anunnaki themselves worked the land. The tablets describe how these divine beings dug canals, cultivated food, and mined resources from the earth. But eventually, they grew tired. According to the myth of Enki and Ninmah, recorded on tablets dated approximately 2,000 years before the Common Era, the lesser Anunnaki rebelled against this hard labor. In response, Enki, the ingenious god of waters and wisdom, proposed a solution: create a new species to do the work in their place. The tablets describe in disturbing detail how Enki and the mother goddess Ninmah, also known as Ninhursag, shaped the first humans. The text reports, Ninmah took clay from the Abzu, deep waters, and shaped the form of a being. Enki looked upon the form and decreed its fate, giving it life. What makes this narrative so intriguing is its parallel with other creation stories around the world, including the biblical account in Genesis, where God forms Adam from the dust of the earth. But the Sumerian version adds a disturbing element. We were created specifically as a kind of servant or slave. The Atrahasis elaborates further on this process, describing how Enki and Ninmah sacrificed a lesser Anunnaki god, mixing his blood and flesh with clay to create humans. Divine flesh and blood were mixed with clay, so that the divine spirit would exist in the body of man. This description raises fascinating questions. Is the text describing symbolically the creation of life? Or could it be interpreted, as some theorists propose, as a primitive reference to some kind of genetic manipulation? Could the mixing of divine blood with clay be an ancient way of describing the combination of genetic material? In the tablets of Enki and Ninmah, we find another revealing passage. After Ninmah created 7 males and 7 females, they multiplied. This suggests a deliberate creation of sufficient genetic diversity to establish a viable population. The text continues describing how the first humans were imperfect, some unable to reproduce, others with physical deficiencies. This eerily evokes the idea of initial experiments, trial and error before achieving the desired result. Even more revealing is the Sumerian term for human, liu datu datu tatul yu, which literally means the one who was mixed. The tablets state that humans were created in the image of the gods, but with deliberately imposed limitations. As the text says, "You gave man wisdom, but you did not give him eternity." This narrative of artificial creation resonates disconcertingly with modern scientific debates about genetic engineering and the origins of humanity. The tablets suggest that the Anunnaki created humans as a hybrid species, part themselves, part Earth. In Sumerian cylinder seals, we find enigmatic images that seem to show medical or creation procedures, with humanoid figures working at tables resembling primitive laboratories. These representations, dated over 4,000 years ago, challenge conventional interpretations. Particularly intriguing is the tablet known as VAT 7891, preserved in the Berlin Museum, which contains what appears to be a formula for human creation, with specific proportions of divine and earthly elements. The traditional academic view interprets these narratives as religious metaphors to explain human existence. However, the specificity of technical details raises questions about whether there could be something more literal in these descriptions. If we consider for a moment the possibility that the Anunnaki were advanced beings from another world, could these creation narratives be interpreted as records of deliberate genetic intervention? Are the Sumerian tablets preserving the memory of our true creators? What makes this question even more complex is that modern genetic studies have identified apparently inexplicable evolutionary leaps in human development. The so-called missing link, the evolutionary gap between earlier hominids and modern Homo sapiens, remains an enigma for science. The Sumerian tablets suggest that our creation had a specific purpose, to serve the Anunnaki, but they also indicate that we received something more. A spark of divine consciousness, the ability to think, create, and question. Is this the true inheritance of the Anunnaki that remains in us to this day? Have you ever wondered why, among all Earth species, only humans developed advanced technology and complex civilization? Is it coincidence or the result of external intervention long ago? But the relationship between creators and created did not remain harmonious for long. The Sumerian tablets tell how the Anunnaki eventually regretted their creation and tried to destroy us completely. I heard the roar of the storm. The noise reached to heaven. The earth trembled. For a whole day the storm devastated the land. Swiftly it blew, and then came the flood. Like a battle over the people, destruction passed. Tablet 13 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, approximately 2100 years before the Common Era. This vivid description of the Great Flood, recorded on Sumerian and Akkadian tablets, echoes through the millennia with disturbing force. The cataclysmic event that nearly exterminated humanity appears not only in Mesopotamian narratives, but resurfaces in more than 200 different cultures around the world. In the tablets of Atrahasis and the 11th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh, we find the complete story of this devastating event. According to these ancient texts, the Anunnaki, led by the severe Enlil, decided to destroy the humanity they had created. The reason for this drastic decision? The tablets reveal something surprising. The noise of mankind became so great that Enlil could not sleep. This seemingly trivial explanation hides a deeper meaning. The texts elaborate that humans had multiplied excessively, becoming noisy, disobedient, and consuming resources uncontrollably. Enlil convened the Council of the Anunnaki and proposed the complete destruction of humanity through a catastrophic flood. The gods agreed and swore secrecy, but Enki, described as friend and protector of humanity, broke this oath. In a fascinating passage from Atrahasis, Enki does not speak directly to his human protege Utnapishtim, the Sumerian equivalent of Noah, but whispers through a reed wall, "Man of Shuruppak, son of Ubartutu, tear down your house, build a boat, abandon your possessions, save your life. The boat you will build shall have its measurements equal in all directions." Thus, the tablets proceed to provide detailed instructions for the construction of the vessel, including precise dimensions, materials, and waterproofing techniques with bitumen. They describe how Utnapishtim should bring the seed of all living creatures to preserve life on Earth. When the flood finally came, the tablets describe a storm of apocalyptic proportions. The Anunnaki raised torches, setting the land ablaze with their brightness. Adad's devastation reached to heaven, turning all brightness to darkness. For 6 days and 7 nights, winds and storms dominated the land. What makes this narrative particularly intriguing is the reaction of the Anunnaki themselves as they witnessed the destruction they unleashed. The tablets report, "The gods, the Anunnaki, wept with her, the goddess Ishtar. The gods, humbled, sat weeping. Their lips were closed in distress." See, this detail humanizes the Anunnaki in a surprising way, suggesting that even these powerful beings were shaken by the magnitude of destruction they caused. Had they underestimated the power of their own actions? After the flood, When Utnapishtim offers sacrifices, the tablets describe the Anunnaki gathering like flies over the offerings, hungry after the devastation. This peculiar image raises questions about the physical nature of these supposedly divine beings. The confrontation that follows between Enlil and Enki reveals deep tensions among the Anunnaki. Enlil is initially furious to discover that humans survived, but Enki defends his decision. "I ensured the survival of life." Eventually, Enlil is persuaded to accept humanity's continuance, but with new limitations imposed. Modern geological evidence confirms that a catastrophic flood event occurred in the Mesopotamian region approximately between 9,000 and 7,000 years before the Common Era, when the Black Sea and Persian Gulf overflowed due to melting glaciers from the last ice age. But could this natural event have been predicted or even manipulated by beings with advanced technology? The tablets suggest that the Anunnaki had prior knowledge of the impending flood and the ability to survive it in their celestial vessels. Curiously, many of the tablets containing these narratives were discovered in Nippur in 1889, buried as if deliberately preserved for posterity. Were the ancient scribes trying to ensure that this critical knowledge would survive for future generations? The flood marks a turning point in the relationship between Anunnaki and humans. After this catastrophe, the tablets describe a new era in which the Anunnaki establish human royalty as intermediaries between them and the general population. This leads us to the intriguing phenomenon of the first Sumerian kings, described with almost superhuman characteristics. Have you ever wondered why so many ancient cultures share stories of a great flood? Is it collective memory of a real event, or something deeper inscribed in our own genetic heritage? The flood story raises disturbing questions about humanity's value in the eyes of our supposed creators. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this narrative is what came after. The era of semi-divine kings who supposedly ruled for thousands of years. After kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king and reigned for 28,800 years. Sumerian king list, approximately 2,100 years before the Common Era. This extraordinary statement opens one of the most enigmatic documents ever discovered, the Sumerian king list. Inscribed on various cuneiform tablets, this chronological list records dynasties of Sumerian rulers, beginning with kings who supposedly reigned for impossible periods, tens of thousands of years. Alulim, the first king after the flood, allegedly ruled for 28,800 years. His successor, Alalgar, for 36,000 years. In total, 8 pre-Diluvian kings ruled for a combined total of 241,200 years, according to this ancient document. Traditional academia interprets these numbers as purely symbolic or the result of translation errors. However, the precision with which the scribes recorded these reigns, not in round numbers, but in specific values like 28,800, suggests a deliberate counting system. Even more intriguing is the abrupt transition that occurs in the list. After the flood, the reigns gradually diminish to more plausible durations until they reach humanly possible periods in later historical dynasties. The tablets explicitly state that these early rulers had divine lineage. They were direct descendants of the Anunnaki. The text describes how kingship descended from heaven after the flood, establishing a new social order with kings serving as intermediaries between the gods and common humans. In Uruk, we find the legendary Gilgamesh, described in the tablets as 2/3 god, 1/3 man. His epic recounts his quest for immortality, motivated by the anguishing awareness of his partial mortality. The tablets describe how he travels to find Utnapishtim, the flood survivor who received eternal life from the Anunnaki. Sumerian cylinder seals frequently portray these ancient kings with distinctive characteristics: elevated stature, specific features, and symbols of divine authority. Curiously, archaeological excavations in Sumerian royal tombs have revealed skeletons of unusual stature for the time, some exceeding 6 feet, when the average height was significantly shorter. The alternative theory proposed by researchers like Sitchin suggests a literal explanation for these extraordinarily long reigns and distinctive physical characteristics. These first rulers were Anunnaki human hybrids, partially inheriting the longevity and physical characteristics of their non-terrestrial ancestors. The Nippur tablets contain fascinating passages about how the Anunnaki carefully selected specific human lineages to rule, establishing cities as administrative centers. Each major city was associated with a specific Anunnaki: Eridu with Enki, Nippur with Enlil, Uruk with Inanna. Particularly revealing is the tablet known as CBS 114-26, preserved at the University of Pennsylvania, which details coronation rituals where the new king received the Me, a divine object or knowledge that conferred authority. The text describes how the king drank from the divine cup and received the scepter of lapis lazuli, symbolizing his connection with the Anunnaki. The Sumerian king list also contains an intriguing passage about Etana, a king who ascended to heaven. The tablets describe how he was carried by an eagle, rising so high that the earth became like a mountain and the sea like a stream. Could this be a primitive description of a physical ascension to the realms of the Anunnaki? Equally fascinating is King Adapa, described in the tablets as a sage created by Enki, who received broad understanding to reveal the designs of the land. Adapa was taken upward to meet Anu, but was instructed by Enki to refuse the food of life offered, apparently depriving humanity of immortality for some hidden purpose. The tablets describe how these semi-divine kings possessed extraordinary knowledge and abilities. Enmeduranki, a pre-Diluvian king, allegedly received from the Anunnaki the knowledge of divination, astronomy, and mathematics, which he then transmitted to humans. The gradual transition from extremely long reigns to shorter periods could reflect the progressive dilution of Anunnaki blood in royal lineages. The tablets suggest that the Anunnaki eventually reduced their direct interaction with humanity, ruling through chosen representatives. This narrative of hybrid kings raises fascinating questions about the possible ongoing genetic intervention of the Anunnaki in human history. Are certain human lineages carrying more of this genetic legacy than others? Have you ever wondered why so many ancient cultures practiced consanguineous royal marriages, insisting on the purity of royal blood? Could this practice reflect an attempt to preserve specific genetic traits inherited from non-human ancestors? The implications of these narratives are profound, suggesting that the very structure of human civilization, social hierarchies, monarchies, and religious systems may have been modeled according to a plan established by the Anunnaki. But to fully understand the impact of these beings on humanity, we must examine more closely the manuscripts themselves that preserve their legacy, fragments of ancient knowledge that have survived through the millennia. He who saw everything, who knew the countries of the world, who understood wisdom, who saw mysteries and revealed what was hidden, who brought information from before the flood. Futi, prologue of the Epic of Gilgamesh, approximately 2100 years before the Common Era. These opening words of humanity's oldest epic reveal something profound about the Sumerian tablets. They were not mere records, but vehicles for transmitting knowledge considered sacred and primordial. Cuneiform tablets represent one of humanity's greatest achievements, the invention of writing. But what makes Sumerian writing particularly fascinating is that it appears in history already fully developed, with a complex system of more than 600 signs. Archaeologists have discovered more than 500,000 cuneiform tablets, but it's estimated that only about 10% have been adequately translated. Many remain in museum storage facilities, while others continue to be buried in archaeological sites in modern Iraq, a region where decades of conflict have hindered systematic excavations. The Nippur tablets, discovered in 1889, constitute one of the largest libraries of the ancient world, with more than 30,000 fragments. Among them are texts that the Sumerians themselves considered ancient, copied and preserved through generations of scribes. Particularly intriguing is the tablet known as K3751, preserved in the British Museum, which contains a catalogue of Sumerian literary works, many of which remain lost. The text mentions the books from before the flood, suggesting that the Sumerians believed even more ancient knowledge had existed and been partially recovered. The tablets were not created casually. Producing a cuneiform text involved a meticulous process. High-quality clay was purified, molded into rectangular or oval shape, inscribed with a stylus while moist, and then dried in the sun or baked in kilns for permanent preservation. Scribes occupied an elevated position in Sumerian society. Texts like Instructions of Shuruppak describe how only the most talented and disciplined young people were selected for this rigorous training, which lasted years and included not only writing, but mathematics, astronomy, history, and religious rituals. The tablets reveal that the Sumerians possessed surprisingly advanced knowledge in multiple fields. The Plimpton 322 tablet, dated approximately 1750 years before the Common Era, contains complex Pythagorean triples, suggesting sophisticated mathematical understanding more than 1,000 years before Pythagoras. Astronomical texts like the Maul Apian show that the Sumerians mapped constellations, tracked planetary movements, and predicted eclipses with remarkable precision. Even more surprising, some tablets contain detailed descriptions of all the planets in the solar system, including Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which are not visible to the naked eye. The VAT 7847 tablet, preserved in the Berlin Museum, contains what appears to be a diagram of the solar system, showing the Sun at the center with planets in orbit, a heliocentric model that Western science would only rediscover millennia later with Copernicus. Medical texts like BAM 393 describe surgical procedures, pharmaceutical treatments, and diagnoses that demonstrate sophisticated anatomical understanding. Some tablets mention specific metal medical instruments for different procedures, including delicate eye operations. The tablets also preserve advanced technological knowledge. Texts from describe complex metallurgical processes for creating specific alloys. The CBS 1766 tablet contains detailed instructions for building a boat that, according to the text, can travel underwater, possibly a primitive reference to a submarine. Particularly fascinating are the tablets that describe the ME, divine objects or knowledge that conferred specific powers. The goddess Inanna is described stealing more than 100 of these ME from Enki, each representing a different civilizational technology or concept. The list includes items like the art of metalworking, writing, music, but also more abstract concepts like descent to the underworld and the art of love. Were these me metaphors for specific knowledge, or, as some theorists propose, actual technological devices? Many tablets contain what appear to be encrypted formulas or recipes. The BM 92687 tablet in the British Museum contains complex numerical sequences that some researchers interpret as possible genetic codes or chemical formulas. The most intriguing aspect of these tablets is that many were deliberately buried in temple foundations or preserved in sealed chambers, as if their creators were trying to ensure their survival for future generations. Have you ever wondered why so many of these tablets survived, while other materials perished? Baked clay proved to be one of the most durable means of information preservation ever created by humanity, surviving fires that would destroy papyrus or parchment. Were the ancient Sumerian scribes consciously preserving knowledge for the future? The tablets frequently end with warnings against their destruction and blessings for those who preserve them. These tablets are not just historical artifacts, but potentially portals to lost knowledge that could transform our understanding of the human past and, perhaps, our future. But perhaps the most controversial aspect of this legacy is the modern interpretation that sees in the Anunnaki not mythological gods, but visitors from another world who shaped our history and evolution. What is man, that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man, that thou visitest him? This ancient question from Psalm 8 echoes the same fundamental questions that the Sumerian tablets tried to answer. What is our place in the cosmos, and what is our relationship with seemingly superior beings? The Sumerian narratives about the Anunnaki have found surprising resonance in the modern era, inspiring interpretations that transcend the traditional academic view. Zecharia Sitchin, in his series The Earth Chronicles, proposed a literal reading of the tablets, suggesting that the Anunnaki were beings from a planet called Nibiru, with an elliptical orbit that brings it into our solar system every 3,600 years. According to this controversial interpretation, the tablets of the Enuma Elish describe not just mythology, but actual astronomical events, including a cosmic collision between Nibiru and a primordial planet called Tiamat, whose fragments formed Earth and the asteroid belt. The tablet known as K8538, preserved in the British Museum, contains what appears to be a representation of the solar system with an additional body in elliptical orbit. Traditional scholars interpret this as symbolic representation, while alternative theorists see evidence of inexplicable astronomical knowledge. Particularly intriguing are the representations on Sumerian cylinder seals showing humanoid figures with unusual characteristics, elevated stature, elaborate garments resembling spacesuits, and frequently portrayed alongside a symbol that looks like a craft or flying vehicle. The seal known as VA-243 from the Berlin Museum shows seated figures with what appears to be a complete solar system above them, including the sun and planets in approximately correct proportions. How could the Sumerians have this knowledge without telescopes? The tablets describe the Anunnaki traveling in celestial boats, capable of producing fire and smoke, and making the earth tremble with their roar. These vehicles are called Mu in Sumerian, a term that also means that which rises up. The conventional academic view interprets these descriptions as metaphors for natural phenomena like storms and lightning. However, the technical specificity of some passages raises questions about whether they could be describing actual technology, incomprehensible to ancient scribes. The Ki-E-2P 3657 tablet contains a fascinating text known as the Myth of Etana, which describes in vivid detail the experience of a Sumerian king being taken to heaven by an eagle. The text recounts how, as he ascended, the land became like a garden, then like a hill, and finally like a deep well. A remarkably accurate description of the perspective change during a vertical ascent. Even more revealing is the passage. "Look down, my friend, how the land now appears. The vast waters are just like a bread. Look again, the land is now just like a garden, and the vast sea is just like a water basket." This description eerily evokes modern accounts of astronauts observing Earth from space. The Sumerian tablets also contain references to objects that could be interpreted as advanced technological devices. The Eye of Marduk is described as an object that allowed seeing at a distance and through obstacles, Ishtar's divine ray could make mountains tremble. Are these metaphors for natural phenomena or descriptions of actual technology? Curiously, many ancient cultures around the world share similar narratives of gods who descended from the heavens, brought knowledge, and eventually departed with promises of return. From the Viracochas of the Incas to the Egyptian Neteru and the Hindu Devas, we find surprising parallels. The ancient astronaut theory proposes that these globally consistent narratives could reflect actual encounters with advanced beings, interpreted through the linguistic and conceptual limitations of each culture. Critics of this view point out that literal interpretations of the tablets ignore the cultural context and metaphorical nature of ancient religious language. However, proponents argue that the technical specificity of many descriptions transcends simple metaphors. What makes the debate particularly fascinating is that both interpretations, mythological and literal, raise profound questions about our origins and identity as a species. If the Anunnaki were merely mythological constructs, what explains the extraordinary sophistication of Sumerian civilization that seemingly emerged from nowhere? How did a culture at the dawn of human history develop advanced mathematics, precise astronomy, complex engineering, and sophisticated literature without clear evolutionary antecedents? On the other hand, if we consider the possibility of external intervention in our history, we are confronted with equally profound questions about our autonomy as a species and our place in the cosmos. The Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki eventually departing from Earth, but promising to return. The text, known as the Prophecy of Marduk, contains intriguing passages about a future return. When the great planet crosses the sky, the Anunnaki will return to judge. This narrative of departure and promise of return resonates disconcertingly with eschatological traditions of multiple world religions, from the Judeo-Christian concept of the Second Coming to the Hindu Kalki avatar and the Buddhist Maitreya. Could it be possible that these global expectations of future divine intervention derive from a common cultural memory of beings who actually intervened in the human past? Even more provocative is to consider whether the Anunnaki, if they existed as real beings, might have left more than just clay tablets as their legacy. Could they have left a mark in our own genetic code? Modern genetic studies have identified what scientists call Y-chromosomal Adam and mitochondrial Eve, evidence of genetic bottlenecks in the human past where our genetic diversity was significantly reduced. These events roughly coincide with the emergence of modern human civilization. The so-called Neolithic Revolution, the abrupt transition from hunter-gatherers to urbanized farmers, remains an enigma for conventional archaeology. How to explain this radical change in human behavior after hundreds of thousands of years of relative technological stagnation? The Sumerian tablets offer an alternative narrative. Civilization was not a gradual discovery, but a gift or imposition from the Anunnaki. Regardless of how we interpret these ancient narratives, they invite us to question our origins and destiny as a species. If we are, as the tablets suggest, the product of deliberate intervention, what implications would this have for our identity and purpose? Perhaps the true legacy of the Anunnaki is not just the technical knowledge they supposedly transmitted to us, but the spark of consciousness that allows us to question our own existence. The ability to look at the stars and ask, are we alone? The Sumerian tablets, with their accounts of gods who descended from heaven, created humans, and eventually departed, continue to challenge our understanding. Whether interpreted as sophisticated mythology or records of actual events, they represent humanity's oldest effort to answer the fundamental questions that still move us today. As the Sumerian texts themselves state, the knowledge of times before the flood was not lost. It was preserved on clay tablets for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. See, perhaps the real mystery is not whether the Anunnaki existed, but why their stories continue to resonate so deeply with us millennia after the last cuneiform tablets were inscribed. Do you believe we are the product of natural evolution, or that our history contains chapters yet to be revealed? The answer may be waiting, preserved in ancient clay, for those willing to question conventional narratives and explore extraordinary possibilities. The legacy of the Anunnaki, whether literal or metaphorical, invites us to look both to our most distant past and to the stars above, recognizing that perhaps, as the ancient Sumerians suggested, our destiny has always been written in the heavens.